Welcome to worship with the Universalist Unitarian Church of Peoria. My name is the Reverend Innis. It is my great joy to be the minister with this congregation of people of all ages and at all stages of life. This is a congregation that is living into its mission, making strides to do so. We say here that we embrace joy, enrich connections, encourage growth, and empower dreams. We embrace and love wholeheartedly. We add to the wholeness and the healing of the world whenever possible. And we encourage growth and embrace freedom and care for one another. We also take to heart our connection with the world. This land is the ancestral home of the Peoria people. They and other nations were here long before the first European settlers came down the Illinois River. So we take a moment, as we have been asked to do in our service, to honor the Peoria people for who they were and for who they are today. I want to take a moment to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us, especially those who are joining us for the first time. It is no small effort to look around and venture into an established community. Thank you for finding us. I want to invite you to see the ushers and the greeters for name tags. Please ask all the questions and stay for coffee after the service in Fellowship Hall if you're in person. And also, if you're online, we have a little conversation there on Zoom. I also want to invite you to take a check and set your devices to worship mode. Always a good thing to double check. And I have a few notes for this morning. It so happens we heard this week that our Love Wins Valentine's dinner that's coming up this Friday evening is sold out. Yes. Yes. I want to thank everybody who bought a ticket and went with the big idea that just kind of emerged organically in the board meeting in December, that we wanted to show up. And how can we show up? We feed people. It's such a good thing. And there'll be dancing, I think a little Roomba, we'll try. And we still need people to help with the setup, with, I think, serving and with bringing desserts. I invite you to see Katie Jones or Jesse Laughlin if you'd like to know how you can be helpful on the day. And I want to I want to add a note that we have the first of 2 cooperative Girl Scout cookie sales today after service. We are big fans of supporting the Girl Scouts and all that they do. And come and buy the cookies. Don't wait. Don't be shy. The Scouts can take cash, check, or credit card. And, come and join us and support a good bunch of folks. We have some wonderful youth who are part of the scouting program in our congregation. And we want to keep encouraging that as well. I want to make sure folks, by all means, take a quick look at the order of service for all the announcements of things coming up. There's far more than I can begin to invite you to, but you are invited, so please check it out. And now let us turn to our opening hymn, number 67, We Sing Now Together. Please be seated. And let me invite Dave Grebner forward for our opening words.
A Holy Alchemy by Reverend Kim Mason. Once upon a time, chemists believed they could transform lead into gold or death into life. We laugh, but are we not also in the business of alchemy, turning loneliness into connection, pain into comfort, anger into solidarity, faith into action? The subtle magic of church combines love and justice, creates hope out of fear, transforms individuals into community. Here we engage in a holy alchemy, finding beauty in the ordinary and life in the present. Come, let us be transformed together.
And I invite Kathy McNeil forward for our chalice lighting.
This chalice is lit for you by Tara Humphreys. Whether you're from the south, the east, the north, or the west, whether you were born into this faith, found it, or it found you, whether you feel at home or are still trying to find your place, whether you believe in God, are open to mystery, or still have no idea, whether you're unemployed, underemployed, cobbling things together, overworking, or in school, whether you're holding anxiety, grief, confusion, anger, hope, restlessness, or deep peace, Unitarian Universalism has a place for you. It's right here, and this chalice is lit for you.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Days are breaking in my soul. I invite us into a time of reflection. You are invited to come forward and light the candles within the embrace of this circle of care. For those who are online, I invite you to let these candles be for you. Come forward during our music for meditation and let these candles be lit. Let us enter into our music for meditation. Let there arise among us a spirit of compassion. Let our hearts be warm to the presence of our whole human family. May our memories be sparked to recall how nothing human is alien to any of us. And in this hour of quiet reflection, may we be summoned to recognize our own pain, the pain of the other, and to offer kind hearts and willing hands in the service of the Spirit and in the human search for meaning. This is the time for the sharing of joys and sorrows among us. I want to add a note in case you hadn't noticed that we have done a little switching of the children's area in the sanctuary from near the pianos to over on the far side of the sanctuary. Hopefully more room to roam because we roam, because that's what we do. And let me offer a note of thanks to everybody who just brought me warm tea. Thank you. I am recovering. I'm fine. I want to thank everybody who was part of the funeral and graveside services a week ago Saturday for Keith Berry. Thank you to Gary Hall and the other members of the Military Honor Guard who paid tribute to Keith at the graveside service for his service as a veteran in the Vietnam War. It really meant so much to the family and to Keith's wife, Cinda, that they could do that tribute. I also want to offer a note of thanks to everybody who was part of remembering and celebrating Lucy McCrae on February 7th, on Friday. Graveside service in Pekin and the memorial service at our church went well. The flowers we have in the sanctuary are from Lucy's service. I turn to notes of sympathy. We offer our sympathy to BJ and Terrence Lindsay for the death of Terrence's mother, Joanne. She died on February 5th after a recent decline in her health. She was beloved, and she was beloved of Terrence and BJ's son, Owen, so much as well. And there's a way in which it's good to know that they are together. And I want to also offer a note of thanks and sharing that I've mentioned in recent months that my father was going through his own health concerns and declining from cancer, and that he had been in hospice since November. And he just passed on Thursday morning at the age of 81. And I will be getting on a plane this afternoon to go to Massachusetts to spend a few days with my family. Thank you very much for your support. I invite us to take one more moment of shared quiet, knowing that there is so much in our hearts, in our lives, and in the world. There is so much among us. Let us take one more moment in shared quiet, knowing that we have this one moment, that it is ours, and that we get to have this together. So let this circle that we share expand to include all the names, the milestones, the joys and the sorrows that are with us, whether spoken or silent. Let us hold one more moment together and breathe. Amen. Shalom. Salam. And blessed be. I invite Jesse forward for our story today.
A little game of hide and seek to start the day. Have you ever been alone or felt a little apart from the group? Let's read a story this morning called Say Hello, about how one little word can make a big difference. Left out. All alone. No friend, no home. What's this? Can I play too? It's great to make new friends like you. Left out. No fun. Why am I the only one? Have you ever felt like you were the only one? Left out. No fun. Why am I the lonely one? Left out, no fun? I wouldn't do this to anyone. What's this? Come and join the fun. Brought his ball. No need to be the lonely one. When someone is feeling left out, low, it doesn't take much to say, hello. As a matter of fact, you can say it lots of ways. Sometimes we have to reach out and bring people in so they know we want them here with us. The kids and volunteers are invited to join me back in religious education. You can sing us now to Go Now in Peace.
Goodness. There is a thing in every worship service. It is said that there's 3 things that go wrong, at least. The question is whether or not anybody knows it. I'll just be visible for today. That's fine. We're all good. Today in UU congregations all over the world, people will gather in an effort to live into, as best we can, what we profess about placing love at the center of all we do. What a magnificent challenge. We are currently living in times that are baiting us not to love. The social and political atmosphere in which we travel insidiously tempts us to find fault, place blame, point fingers, and increase that which tears us apart. And yet, we practice a faith often imperfectly, frequently imperfectly, because we are in fact human. But we continue to practice a faith where we are called to answer the question, what is the most loving thing I can do right now? What an astounding challenge. What an unbelievably vital attempt. What an incredibly needed beacon for the future of us all. And this answer to this question comes every day. Certainly comes on Sundays in how we are trying to live our mission visibly and in conversation, in all the ways that we act, including in our financial gifts. And so we take a moment in our service to pass the plate, as archaic as an idea as that still is in our electronic age, it still is an important act. We make a donation. We make this tangible gift of the things that we can do. We also, in that tangible action, we make a portion of our resources and send that out into the world through our Share the Plate practice. Each week we set aside half of the undesignated plate for an organization local that's doing good work. And this month's Share the Plate recipient is Peoria Proud. And they support diversity, equity throughout the greater Peoria area. The coalition creates safe spaces for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual plus community by hosting River City Pride, by advocating for pro LGBTQ plus legislation, safe zone training, and much more. And so we are proud to be a supporter of this effort in the world. Again, half of the undesignated plate goes to Peoria Proud this month. Please use the envelopes in the pews to indicate the use of your donation. Go to the QR code in the order of service. And let me say thank you for all of the ways that you give, for all the ways that you make this congregation and its mission possible. And now I invite the ushers to please come forward. Our reading today is from the late Reverend Gordon McKeeman, one of our Universalist ancestors of the 20th century. He says in his poem, Contact, I stretch forth my hand, knowing not what I shall touch. A tender spot, an open wound, warmth, pulsing life, fragile blossoms, a rock, ice. And I am tentative, trembling, wishing to avoid hurt, wanting to link my life with life. Lonely, I desire companions. Naked, I long for defenders. Lost, I want to find, to be found. Will I touch strangers or enemies or nothing? My hand is withdrawn, but still it touches my vulnerable skin, my furrowed brow, my empty pocket, and my full heart. Do others reach, tremble, withdraw? Do they desire, long, seek? Are they lonely, fearful, lost? Will they grasp a tentative, trembling hand? I stretch forth my hand, knowing not what I shall touch, but hoping, but hoping. Here ends the reading. Please rise in body or spirit and join me for our hymn number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Now, I suspect I am not alone in having had a number of moments of loneliness in my life. Let me speak a moment of middle school. I think that's almost common to be like the stereotype, but it's also true, right? I was one of those kids for certain periods of time that had a hard time finding people to sit with at lunch. I got on better with some of the boys, but what they talked about at lunch really wasn't quite my thing. And in fact, I really wanted to sit with the girls, but they really didn't make space for me, including the ones that I got on with and liked me, but didn't want to show that they liked me for fear that they would be excluded from the circles as well. And this was visible enough. I mean, I sat on the same kind of long tables in the cafeteria, but just far enough away so that even the teachers noticed. Oh, that's embarrassing. Even the teachers noticed, maybe said something to me, maybe even said something to my parents, which kind of made it worse, or at least more self conscious. I will offer that this period of time wasn't forever. It was enough, though. It was enough to know what it's like to be disconnected in a room full of people. Now, I experienced the more specific definition of loneliness when I spent a year in Maine for my second internship as a minister. Now, the more specific definition of loneliness is fairly simple. It's the lack of meaningful connection, meaningful personal connection. But while I was in uh, Maine for a year, I was in the last year of my divinity school degree, and I wanted to add on to my experience. So, yes, let's pile on another internship because that's me. And I was on my own as a student minister in Belfast. Beautiful harbor town, beautiful. My supervisor was 2 hours away. I mean, I was it. And it is one thing to be alone or feeling lonely in familiar surroundings, like when I was younger and in middle school, but it was my school, I was going home to my family every day and so on. And it's another thing to be alone when away from all of those systems. Family, friends, classmates, even friends of friends, as I had in college and divinity school in person. So this for me was a first time to live on my own away from any past social contacts. There weren't this kind of crowd, this population, if you will, of people who would have been glad to see me if I ran into them at the local co-op, which was the social center of town, I will say. Now, the congregation members were lovely. They were. And they still have a very much a place in my heart as well. But they were not my friends. That was not a personal relationship. I met friends of the congregation, which also was good, and got to know people, especially who were part of the recovery community. That was a fairly large, connected network there. One of the things I figured out in Maine in winter, do not go to Maine without a job and a relationship. I'm just offering that as advice. I had to figure out my own heart as well as serve with the congregation. I was in that definition of loneliness as offered by the US Surgeon General's study, 2023 study, our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And in that study, they offer this definition of loneliness is a subjective, distressing experience that results from perceived isolation or inadequate meaningful connections, where inadequate refers to the discrepancy or unmet need between an individual's preferred and actual experience. So, loneliness, in essence, is wanting more meaningful connections and feeling the lack of them acutely. Rick Maston, the late UU minister and troubadour, kind of gets to that feeling in a more visceral way in his poem, From the Shore. He says, I ain't waving, babe, I'm drowning. Going down into a low, cold, lonely sea. I ain't waving, babe, I'm drowning. So, babe, quit waving at me. I ain't waving, babe, I'm crying. I'm crying, oh, why can't you see? I ain't fooling, babe, I ain't fooling. So, babe, quit fooling with me. I ain't waving, babe, I'm drowning. I'm going down here right in front of you, and you're waving, babe, you keep waving. Hey, babe, are you drowning too? Are you drowning too? No one wants to be so lost. Yet how often is part of us crying, can't you see me? This concern of loneliness in our individual lives and in our world is so deep that the US Surgeon General didn't just study it. Their office offered a warning about its impact on our individual and collective health. They say loneliness and its negative impact has been rising in our society for some decades. The pandemic and the enforced isolation boosted the experience of loneliness, and it's continuing to impact all of us. For a faith tradition such as this, grounded in connection and emphasizing relationship, the lateral and the transcendent, speaking to loneliness is part of our task. It is part of the mission of this church, in essence, to grow in mind, body, and spirit, and adding to the wholeness and the healing of the world, to love abundantly. So that means the brokenheartedness is our business. And it's not just a to-do list of how to meet people, too. I mean, you can make a top 10 list of how to find people. It's how do you cultivate relationship? And there's a distinction I want to make. We've talked about loneliness a little bit, but I want to make a distinction between it and isolation. Isolation, as the Surgeon General was talking about, is something that can be measured. You can measure how many points of contact a person does or doesn't have. That's a degree of isolation. That can be objectively measured. Solitude is also one of the things that people think about. Solitude, by contrast, is also subjective, as loneliness is. But solitude is more, as they offer in their study definition, is being by oneself in any context and feels more chosen. One can feel more centered and not lonely. The definition of solitude for the Surgeon General is not lonely. I love that. But loneliness is that subjective absence of connection. Former Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy talks about this in his letter in the report. He says, when I first took office as Surgeon General in 2014, I didn't view loneliness as a public health concern. But that was before I embarked on a cross-country listening tour where I heard stories from my fellow Americans that surprised me. People began to tell me they felt isolated, invisible, and insignificant. Even when they couldn't put their finger on the word lonely, time and time again, people of all ages, social, economic backgrounds, from every corner of the country would tell me, I have to shoulder life's burdens all by myself. Or if I disappear tomorrow, no one will even notice. He says, it was a light bulb moment for me. The social disconnection was far more common than he realized. And in recent years, he goes on, about 1 in 2 Americans reported experience loneliness, and that was before the COVID-19 pandemic. Loneliness, they found, is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both the individual and societal health. It is associated with a greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. And the mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. And even greater than that is associated with obesity and physical inactivity. And he says the harmful consequences on a society that lacks social connection can be felt in our schools, our workplaces, and civic organizations where performance, productivity, and engagement are diminished. We have direct encounters, tangible experience. I can imagine, I know for myself, and I imagine also for you, how much this impact on our society shows up. It shows up as a lack of self worth and confidence. It shows up not by somebody necessarily saying lonely, but as anger and fear and addiction. And because we are such social creatures, that when there's this lack of social connection, there's a feeling of failure, that we are not worthy, that we should be ashamed of ourselves because we are seriously, look, we're not enough. And speaking up to ask for help or simply to reach out is to be vulnerable. It is to risk. And as I'm sure we know, one of the deepest ways that loneliness appears shows up in those who choose to leave the world and take their lives. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but I want to acknowledge this and that those who survive and continue are end up with more questions as well. Could we have done more? And then having to find our own answers to those questions makes it that much more difficult and the feeling of loneliness more acute. And finally, we have a social impact that is visible to us, not just in our health, but also recognizing how desperate people are for connection, how much we will seek that out even when those options are unhealthy or destructive to our social fabric. We have so many young men, for example, gravitating to social and political extremes of hatred, of exclusion, because they are ending up being a receptive audience to someone saying, we see you, come on in. One of the places where we can, in fact, start to find some power in this conversation in a moment when it feels like there's so much taken away, there's so much separation encouraged and nurtured in our world, so much division is cultivated and strategically done to us. But we have, in fact, our own power. Simply by making room for this conversation is an act of power. It is a choice to talk about mental health, social health, and how imperfect we are, how messed up, how heartbroken, how much we feel like a social failure. We've had a long trend in our society, especially Western society, of people moving away from religious institutions. Religious institutions have been, in many ways, their own worst enemy about being exclusive, about protecting people who are doing harm to others, about preaching gospels that are in fact harmful and to further discount our inherent worth. And there are so many religious communities that are doing good things, that are in fact offering a message of love and care, that are wanting to be based in compassion and reaching out, because these are human institutions. There's, as much as we don't quite know what religious institutions are going to be in the next few decades, we know they're not, as a whole, going to go out of business anytime soon, because we are human places where we are much needed for gathering of all ages, places where we can be tolerated with our social awkwardness. Yeah, I'm just saying, even I, even I, after all these years in ministry, having a job that gives me a role I can walk into with, even I can appreciate how walking into coffee hour can have flashes back to the cafeteria in middle school. Oh my gosh, can I sit with people? I don't know. Part of making room for that conversation is also recognizing how much we've grown and learned about those, uh, about neurodivergence, about being on the autism spectrum, about social challenges that we may have for various reasons. That's also here. That's also part of our power, is to be able to have that conversation and to be treating each other with grace and attention and curiosity when we don't quite know. We have this fantastic opportunity to be amazed and curious about the full range of how humans' brains work. And we have some range in how our human brains work. I'm just saying. And how that shows up socially. This is a wonderful moment to put love into practice and put love at the center. What's the most loving thing we can do is to learn about each other. We gather together in congregations and talk about being, uh, we need not believe alike to love alike. But we have an opportunity to live into that by not assuming we know what each other is like, by not assuming that we know that somebody else wouldn't want to be reached out to. We get to help each other communicate in compassion and care. And certainly that includes the real quick and easy answer of find people. Find people and small groups and events where we can actually fully meet and talk. I appreciate former Surgeon General Dr. Murthy. One of the points he made in an interview in the Hidden Brain podcast was get to know yourself. This too is a place of power and choice. Get to know yourself. Connect with yourself and then then that helps know what is, how I might explore, how to connect, where to be, what to try, and apply compassion with that getting to know oneself. Because when yet another event maybe doesn't work, or you go to a party and it's socially awkward and you have to just leave, and that's okay, you're not beating yourself up about it either. Each of us can start now. The Surgeon General reminds us. Each of us can start now in our own lives by strengthening our connections and relationships. Our individual relationships, he says, are an untapped resource, a source of healing hidden in plain sight. And that can help us live healthier, productive, and more fulfilled lives. Answer that call from a friend He says, make time for the meal, listen without the distraction of your phone. I know that's a little risk for some of us. Perform an act of service. He says the keys to human connection are simple but extraordinarily powerful, and they are. It's not magic. It's not going to happen all at once. But there is greatness in our hearts and in our lives. And I also want to offer how that much we are companioning each other in this can reach out. One of the places I found that this could be connected is through that another kind of loneliness that is also out there, not just the social one that I've been talking about, but there's a certain cosmic loneliness, a certain I'm not sure where I am as this one tiny dot in the blue marble of space, right? The greatness that is around me is far more vast than I can even begin to comprehend. How do I locate myself? Because we are in this cosmos together, and what's also true is that we are not any more of an expert than the other. There's reasons why we seek meaning. We have study groups. We talk to one another in these small conversations because we are trying to figure out our social and our cosmic location. We search for this meaning together. From Angela Herrera, she says, you stand at the edge of mystery, at the edge of the deep, with the light streaming at you, and you can't hide anything, not even from yourself, when you stand there like that. And then what? She says, maybe you call your pastor and say, what is this? What am I looking at? What do I do? And your pastor comes over and stands at the edge with you. I'm just going to say that would be me. Comes over and stands at the edge with you and says, I have no idea. We do it together. We think of all the generations who've come before that have cast this question out. What do we do? How do we live in love? Wanting to find it and name it and wanting to have an answer. And so, but there isn't one specific one. We simply stand before the mystery and do this together. Our power in this moment, in the brokenness of our hearts and the loneliness and the emptiness of our lives, is far greater and far more diverse than we know. It's not in the grand movements, it is in the small, it is in the moment, it is in the impulse to say, hey, I wonder how they're doing. And in doing so, we cultivate greatness of resilience, of practice of welcome, of the practice of love for ourselves, even and especially when we don't know the way or there's no guarantee of the result, but we simply put ourselves out into the world and try and love again. So let us go forth. Amen. Please rise in body or spirit and join me for our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Good morning. We're going to hear words from Brian Keeley, Carry the Flame, tonight. The chalice is now extinguished, but its light lives on and in the minds and the holes, the souls and the hearts of each one of you. Carry that flame with you as you leave this place and share it with those you love, with those you know, and most especially with those you have yet to meet. Remain standing for Jennifer.
Place. May our feet remember its feel, so that wherever we walk, we allow ourselves to be on hallowed ground. May we know we are kin with every soul, every star, every stone and leaf of grass. And may our words be gentle and our touch be kind, and so may it be. Our worship is ended. Let our service begin.